3 weeks ago, my phone buzzed, displaying a message from my stepmother. The text was a demand, not a request, ordering me to go clean our family's ranch in Montana for a weekend getaway they had planned. My name is Chloe Peterson. I'm 28, and I work in marketing. But to my family, it seems my primary job title is unpaid housekeeper. The message ended with a little flourish of kindness. "Don't be late, you lazy bum." It was as if I had nothing more pressing to do than spend my own weekend scrubbing floors for their vacation. A short, sharp laugh escaped my lips, a sound completely devoid of humor. I didn't even consider replying. For what felt like my entire life, they had treated me like a built-in servant, someone who should be grateful to drop everything and make their lives more convenient. But something was different this time. As more texts began to flood in, more commands, more thinly veiled insults, I found myself scrolling through them with a strange sense of detachment. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard for a moment, but I realized words were pointless. They wouldn't listen. They never did. So instead, I did something else. I booked a flight. I packed a small bag. I went straight to the airport. Barely an hour after their last demanding message, I was sitting in a lounge, sipping a cocktail. A few hours later, I was at a luxury resort in Bali, the kind of place they couldn't even picture me in, let alone afford for themselves. I found a spot by a magnificent, sparkling pool, ordered another tropical drink, and had someone snap a picture of me lounging in a chair, smiling, without a single care in the world. I sent that one photo to the family group chat. No caption, no words, no explanation. Then, with a deep sense of finality, I turned off my phone. Back in the States, they were likely still waiting, picturing me begrudgingly hauling mops and bleach to Montana. But that single photo was about to detonate their entire weekend, and for the first time, I wasn't going to be there to clean up the explosion. What happened after that changed absolutely everything, but that's a story for another time. Have you ever felt like a doormat for your own family? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Tell me how you finally stood up for yourself, or where your dream escape destination would be. Maybe somewhere like Bali? Let's talk. Growing up, I never pictured myself as the family's designated errand runner. But when I was 15, the world as I knew it fractured and fell apart. My mother passed away after a brutal, drawn-out illness, and her absence left a gaping hole in our home that was never properly filled. My dad was a ghost of himself, completely shattered, and I was just a kid trying to navigate my own grief while watching him drift away. We survived, but just barely, clinging to each other like two people on a single piece of driftwood in a vast, empty ocean. It was just 2 years later that he met Sharon. She had a smile that was all sharp angles and a personality to match. Their courtship was a blur. They married quickly, and before I knew it, my half-brother, Leo, was born. Leo, who immediately became the sun in Sharon's solar system, the center of her entire universe. From the moment she moved in, Sharon drew a clear line in the sand, and I was on the wrong side of it. She'd leave me to-do lists on the kitchen counter, laundry, dishes, grocery runs, while Leo, who could barely even walk, was showered with praise for simply existing. "Oh, he's just so bright," she'd coo, brushing past me as I was scrubbing the counters to go adjust his blanket or fix his hair. I was a teenager, drowning in homework and still processing the loss of my mom, but I was expected to be the responsible one. My dad, trapped between his new wife and his old life, simply stood by. He never objected. He'd just offer a tired, weary nod, his silence a price he was willing to pay for a fragile peace. As Leo grew older, the chasm between us only widened. Sharon showered him with her undivided attention. Designer clothes, expensive private lessons for sports he'd quit after a month, and elaborate birthday parties full of laughing children from his class. I was never part of those celebrations. I was usually in the kitchen, washing the platters or picking up discarded wrapping paper. My efforts were invisible, my presence taken for granted. I remember one afternoon when I was 17, I was in my room trying to study for my final exams when I overheard Sharon on the phone with a friend in the hallway. "Oh, Chloe, she's very useful to have around the house," she'd said with a light laugh. "It's almost like having hired help, but cheaper." The word stung like a physical slap, but I swallowed the hurt, telling myself it was temporary, that things would eventually balance out. They never did. The day I left for college, the dynamic was permanently set. I thought distance might help, but it only made the demands more convenient for them. Sharon would call me, not to ask how I was, but with a list of things she needed me to handle at the house on my next visit. "The faucet in the guest bathroom is dripping. You need to fix it," she'd say. Meanwhile, Leo got a free pass on everything. I'd come home for a weekend to find my childhood bedroom had been converted into his personal storage unit, my books and belongings unceremoniously shoved into boxes in the corner. When I'd protest, my dad would just shrug his shoulders, offering his favorite excuse, "It's just easier this way, Chloe." I wanted to scream. Easier for whom? It certainly wasn't easier for me. I tried to have a real conversation with him once. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one my mom and I used to do homework at. My voice trembled as I laid it all out. "Why do you let her treat me like this? Why don't you ever stand up for me?" I asked, my heart aching for him to just see me. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just stared into his coffee cup and muttered something about not wanting to rock the boat. "We have to keep the peace," he said. That was the moment I truly understood. I was completely on my own. Sharon's blatant favoritism wasn't a phase. It was a permanent wall she had built, brick by brick, and I was stuck on the outside. Leo, whether he was oblivious or just a willing participant, followed her lead. He grew into a young man who treated me like an afterthought, a convenience. If I ever said no, if I ever failed to do exactly what they wanted, I was met with a wall of sarcastic comments or cold, punishing silence. The years ticked by, but the roles remained the same. Even as an adult with my own life and career, I was still the first person they called for favors, the one they expected to drop everything at a moment's notice. To them, I wasn't Chloe, the marketing professional. I was still the girl who was useful around the house. Each new request, each dismissive comment chipped away at me, a constant painful reminder that in the family my dad had built after my mom was gone, I didn't truly belong. For so long I kept waiting for my dad to step in, to say something, anything to finally make it right. But he never did. Looking back, I can see how that relentless dynamic shaped the person I became. It forced me to be fiercely independent. I learned to rely solely on myself, to find my strength in the quiet moments when I wasn't running their errands or fixing their messes. But it also left me with a crushing weight, a profound feeling of being invisible in my own family. I carried that burden for more than a decade, until something deep inside me finally began to crack. I wasn't ready to break free just yet, but the seed of rebellion had been planted. My life was about to take a very sharp and very necessary turn. While my family was busy leaning on me, I was pouring everything I had into building a career, and I was doing it completely on my own. After graduating from college, I managed to land a job in marketing. It was a field that sounded glamorous from the outside, but my reality was more like a relentless battlefield. My first position was at a tiny, high-stress agency, where I crafted ad campaigns for demanding local clients who seemed to change their minds with the tide. I can't count the number of nights I spent staring at my laptop until my eyes burned, tweaking slogans, redesigning graphics, fueled by stale coffee and the fear of failure. The pressure was immense. Deadlines were always looming. Supervisors nitpicked every detail, and each mistake felt like a catastrophic step backward. My goal was simple. I wanted to climb the ladder, maybe lead my own team one day. But every single opportunity for advancement required me to work twice as hard as anyone else. I never expected a round of applause, but a little bit of understanding from my family would have meant the world. Instead, they treated my career like it was a cute little hobby, Sharon would call me in the middle of a frantic workday, her voice devoid of any warmth. "The ranch needs cleaning this weekend," she'd state, not ask, as if my schedule was completely open. I'd try to explain, "Sharon, I'm swamped, I have a major deadline," but she'd just cut me off. "It's not that hard, Chloe," she'd snap, brushing off my entire professional life as if it were a triviality. Leo was no better. He'd send texts that read like orders from a boss. "Hey, make sure the place is spotless for us, we're having friends over." I would stare at those messages, a knot of acid forming in my stomach, wondering how they could be so completely oblivious. Did they think my time had no value? The absolute lowest point came during a presentation to a major potential client. I was already running on fumes after an all-nighter. My nerves were shot. Right as I was in the middle of my pitch, my phone, which I thought I had silenced, buzzed loudly on the table. It was Sharon. Again. The text preview lit up. "I need you to handle the ranch before our trip. Don't forget." The distraction, the sudden spike of anger and humiliation threw me completely off my game. I faltered. The clients exchanged a look. My proposal was politely declined. My boss gave me a look that screamed, "You just blew it." I never told my dad. I knew exactly what he would say. "Just help them out, Chloe. It's family." Family. They didn't even know the name of the company I worked for. So I pushed myself even harder, taking on extra projects, volunteering for the toughest accounts, determined to prove my worth to myself because I knew I'd never get that validation from them. Eventually, my hard work paid off. I landed a much better position as a campaign manager at a large national agency. The work was even more grueling. Late nights turned into all-nighters, endless revisions, and clients who expected miracles on a shoestring budget. I genuinely loved the challenge, but the isolation was profound. I'd watch my coworkers leave work to have dinner with their families, listen to them talk about parents who were proud of their successes, and a pang of loneliness would hit me so hard it felt like a physical blow. I had none of that. One year, I even won a small industry award for a particularly successful campaign. It was a small victory, but it was mine, and it was hard-earned. I wanted, just for a moment, to share it with someone who might care. I called my dad, a foolish flicker of hope in my chest. "Dad, I have some great news. I won an award at work." He mumbled a distracted, "Congratulations, that's nice." And then, without missing a beat, shifted the topic. "Listen, while I have you, could you check on the ranch soon? Leo said the lawn needs mowing." I hung up the phone, a familiar tightness gripping my chest. By my late 20s, I had built a solid career, but it had come at an incredible personal cost. I was constantly exhausted, stretched thin between impossible deadlines and familial obligations. And Sharon and Leo never, ever let up. Their demands just kept piling on, each one a weight pushing me further down. They had no concept of the late nights, the missed weekends, or the silent, lonely fight I was waging to be seen as more than just their personal errand runner. I was just so tired of being invisible. That realization hit me like a ton of bricks, and it set the stage for everything that was about to happen. The ranch in Montana had belonged to my grandmother, Eleanor. She passed away 2 years ago, and that ranch was her sanctuary. It wasn't a huge or fancy place, but it was a modest, beautiful plot of land that she had nurtured with her own 2 hands. It was filled with memories of summers I spent there with her, learning how to garden, listening to her stories on the porch swing. When her will was read, I was utterly stunned to learn she had left the ranch to me and only me. I know my dad had expected to inherit it, but she chose me. I always believed it was because she saw how I was treated at home, how I was so often pushed to the side. I made a silent vow to honor her memory by keeping the place exactly as she would have wanted it, pristine and cared for. In what I now see as a moment of naive optimism, I decided to let my family use it. I thought, just maybe it could be a bridge, a way to mend our fractured relationships. That was a catastrophic mistake. From the very first visit, Sharon and Leo treated the ranch not as my property, but as their own private resort. They would drop by unannounced whenever the mood struck them, and every single time, they left behind a wake of destruction. Dirty dishes with crusted-on food would be piled in the sink, muddy footprints would be ground into the hardwood floors, and trash would be left scattered around the rooms as if an invisible cleaning fairy was scheduled to arrive the moment they left. That invisible fairy, of course, was always me. They never offered a single word of thanks. My dad would sometimes tag along, offering a weak, apologetic smile, but never a hand to help. "They're just having fun, Chloe," he'd say, as if that somehow excused the blatant disrespect. One summer, I drove the 3 hours out to check on the place after I knew they'd been there for a weekend. The kitchen was a war zone. Plates were stacked high, attracting flies. Empty beer cans and pizza boxes covered every surface. Leo had apparently brought a group of his friends, and they had left a trail of broken furniture and deep scuff marks all over the walls. I spent the entire next day cleaning, my muscles aching, a hot, bitter anger simmering just beneath my skin. I called Sharon, trying to keep my voice even, and asked why it was so difficult for them to simply pick up after themselves. "You're blowing this completely out of proportion," she snapped before hanging up on me. When I texted Leo a picture of the damage, he didn't even bother to reply. Another time, they showed up while I was already there for the weekend, in the middle of trying to fix a leaky pipe under the kitchen sink. Sharon walked in, barely gave me a nod, and immediately started rearranging the living room furniture. "This place needs a proper woman's touch," she said with a smug little smile, as if my efforts were completely meaningless. Leo tossed his coat over a chair and kicked his muddy boots off by the door, leaving a clump of dirt on the rug. I had to bite my tongue so hard I tasted blood. This was my ranch, my inheritance, my responsibility, and they treated it, and me, like we were nothing. I tried to set boundaries. I wrote down a simple list of rules. Call before you come and clean up after yourselves. They completely ignored it. When I brought it up, Sharon just laughed. "Oh, relax. It's practically family property, isn't it?" she said. No, it wasn't. It was mine, a place entrusted to me by my grandmother, yet they had relegated me to the role of caretaker. My dad never intervened. I found him sweeping the porch once after one of their visits, and he had the grace to look embarrassed. "I'll talk to them," he muttered, but I knew he wouldn't. The real breaking point came about a year ago. I had spent an entire weekend repairing a section of fence that had been damaged in a storm. My hands were raw and blistered from the work. When I came back 2 weeks later, the ranch was trashed again, but this time it was worse. Cans were littered across the lawn. There was a dark red stain on the living room carpet, and one of the windows was cracked. Sharon, it turned out, had thrown a surprise party for Leo's friends, and no one had even bothered to tell me. I called her, my voice firm and cold. "This has to stop, Sharon," I said. She scoffed. "It's just a house. You need to relax." Leo's text came a few minutes later. "Ease up. It's no big deal." No big deal. It was Eleanor's legacy, and they were systematically destroying it. After that incident, I started locking the main gate whenever I wasn't there. This did not go over well. Sharon's voicemails became dripping with irritation. "You're making this so much harder than it needs to be, Chloe," she'd say, her tone implying I owed them unlimited access. Leo sent snide, passive-aggressive messages accusing me of acting like I was better than them. And my dad, as always, remained silent, leaving me to weather their resentment all by myself. I hated the constant tension, but I was done. I was done letting them walk all over me. That ranch was my last physical connection to my grandmother, a reminder of someone in my family who had truly seen and valued me. I was not going to let it become their personal dumping ground. That resolve grew stronger every day, and I knew, sooner or later, it would change everything. 3 days before their planned weekend getaway, Sharon summoned me to their house. Her voice on the phone was icy, all business. "I need you to come over this evening. We need to talk." I knew instantly it was about the ranch. My stomach started churning on the drive over, the cumulative weight of years spent catering to their every demand pressing down on my shoulders. I'd been through this song and dance 100 times, but this time felt different, sharper, more final. When I walked into the living room, the scene felt completely staged. Sharon was perched on the sofa, slowly flipping through a glossy magazine with an air of deliberate nonchalance. Leo was sprawled out in an armchair, glued to his phone, and barely glanced up as I entered. His fiancé, Mark, sat rigidly on the opposite side of the room, giving me a short, uncomfortable nod. And my dad, my own father, just lingered in the doorway to the kitchen, actively avoiding my gaze. It felt like walking into an ambush. Sharon didn't waste any time with pleasantries. "We're heading up to the ranch this weekend," she announced, her tone clipped and final. "You need to prepare it. Clean the floors, dust everything, stock the fridge, the usual." I opened my mouth to object, to say I had plans, but she cut me off before I could even form a word. "And just to be clear, you won't be joining us," she added, her eyes narrowing into cold slits. "This is for family, not the hired help." The words hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen out of the room. Hired help. I stood there, completely stunned, as the insult burrowed its way under my skin. Leo looked up from his phone and smirked, not even bothering to hide his amusement. "Yeah, just make sure it's perfect for us," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. Mark, trying to be part of the team, nodded along. "Shouldn't be too hard for you, right?" he added with a weak smile. Each comment was another twist of the knife. I finally turned to my dad, my last resort, my gaze pleading with him to say something, anything to defend me. He shifted his weight, his eyes darting around the room, landing on everything but me. It's just the way things are, Chloe," he mumbled, his voice so quiet it was barely a whisper. My chest tightened until it was hard to breathe. In that moment, I wasn't just their errand runner. I was completely invisible, a tool to be used and then discarded when the real family wanted to have fun. I had poured my time, my money, and my sweat into maintaining that ranch for their whims, and now they were formally banishing me from my own property. I somehow managed to keep my voice steady. "It's my ranch," I said, meeting Sharon's cold stare. She let out a short, sharp laugh. "Don't get any funny ideas, dear. You're good at cleaning. You should stick to what you're good at." Leo leaned forward, finally giving me his full attention. "Look, just don't make a big fuss about this," he said, as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. Mark shrugged. "She's right, you know." The walls of the room felt like they were closing in, their words echoing a lifetime of being pushed aside, of being made to feel small. This wasn't just about a weekend trip. This was them explicitly stating once and for all that I was not, and never would be, one of them. I tried to reason one last time, my voice rising with desperation. "I have always let you use the place. I take care of everything. Why can't I come?" Sharon's smile was chilling. "Because this is for us," she said, gesturing to Leo, Mark, and my dad. "You're not needed for the good parts." Leo snorted. "Exactly." Mark just gave another faint, agreeable chuckle, like it was all a perfectly reasonable arrangement. My dad remained silent, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, a statue of inaction. I waited. I gave him one last chance to speak, to say I was his daughter, to say I was family, not a servant. But he didn't. The pain was sharp, but it was also horribly familiar. I'd felt it every time Sharon praised Leo and dismissed me, every time Dad looked the other way. But this was worse. They weren't just taking me for granted anymore. They were actively erasing me. I stood there for a second longer, my fists clenched at my sides, a montage of memories flashing through my mind, scrubbing their grime off the floors, repairing the fences they let fall into disrepair, lovingly tending to the garden my grandmother had planted, only for them to treat it all like their private resort, and me like the staff. I finally turned to leave, my throat too tight to speak. "Fine," I whispered. "I'll take care of the ranch." Sharon nodded, already satisfied, and turned back to her magazine. Leo's eyes were already back on his phone. Mark wouldn't look at me. My dad gave me one last fleeting guilty glance, but I was done hoping he would ever be the father I needed. As I walked out the front door, their voices faded behind me, already cheerfully planning their trip, as if I had never even been there. I got into my car and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles were bone white. The hurt was a physical thing, a gaping wound in my chest, but underneath the pain, something else was crystallizing, a cold, hard resolve. They had finally gone too far, and I was not going to let it pass. That night, I sat in my dark apartment, the glow of my laptop screen illuminating my face. Sharon's words, "This is for family, not for the help," kept replaying in my head on a torturous loop, each repetition a fresh cut. Leo's cruel smirk, Mark's casual dismissal, and worst of all, my dad's suffocating silence. They had made their position perfectly clear. I was nothing to them. And in that moment of profound pain, a new feeling emerged. I was done. I was not going to clean their ranch. I was not going to play their twisted games ever again. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I wasn't going to Montana. I was going to go somewhere else, somewhere just for me. I opened a travel website and on a whim, typed farthest tropical destination into the search bar. Bali popped up. It was a world away, a vibrant, sun-drenched paradise, the absolute antithesis of their dusty, drama-filled ranch retreat. I found a last-minute deal on a luxury resort, the kind of place I'd only ever seen in magazines. It would take a significant chunk out of my savings, but for the first time in my life, I didn't care about being practical. I clicked, "Book now." The flight was leaving in 36 hours. I reserved a room with a private balcony and an ocean view. The second the confirmation email hit my inbox, it felt like a physical weight had been lifted from my chest. A tiny spark of defiance I'd been nursing for years finally roared into a fire. They wanted me to scrub their floors? I was going to be sipping cocktails by a pool instead. The next day was a blur of liberating activity. I packed a light carry-on, a swimsuit, a couple of sundresses, my passport. My phone kept buzzing. It was Sharon with a list of cleaning supplies I needed to buy. Then Leo with a follow-up, "Don't slack on this." I read the messages and felt nothing but a cold calm. I ignored them. My resolve was like steel. The following morning, I was on a plane, watching the clouds drift by below, a potent cocktail of adrenaline and pure relief coursing through my veins. 16 hours later, I landed in Denpasar. The air that hit me as I stepped off the plane was warm, humid, and thick with the scent of incense and flowers. It was the smell of freedom. I checked into the resort, a breathtaking oasis of thatched roofs and stone paths winding through lush gardens. The centerpiece was a massive, multi-leveled infinity pool that seemed to spill directly into the ocean. I didn't think about the ranch. I didn't think about their demands. I didn't think about them at all. That afternoon, I changed into a sundress, walked down to the poolside bar, and ordered the most colorful cocktail on the menu. The bartender slid the bright pink drink across the counter with a warm smile. I took a long, slow sip, savoring the sweetness, and had someone snap a photo. Me, looking completely relaxed and happy, the sparkling blue pool and the ocean stretching out behind me. I opened the family group chat, Sharon, Leo, Mark, Dad. They were probably in their car by now, heading to Montana, anticipating their pristine, perfectly prepared weekend home. I attached the photo, sent it. No words. Then I turned my phone off. Meanwhile, back in Montana, they arrived at the ranch expecting their servant to have performed her duties. Instead, they walked into the exact chaotic mess they had left on their last visit. Dirty dishes in the sink, trash overflowing unmade beds with tangled sheets. I hadn't lifted a single finger. I can just picture Sharon's face twisting in fury, her perfect weekend getaway imploding before it had even begun. Leo was probably cursing, loudly blaming me for his own laziness, while Mark stood by, useless as ever. Dad might have half-heartedly muttered something about cleaning it up themselves, but it was too late. The place was unlivable, and they had nowhere to go. They frantically scrambled to find a hotel, but it was a busy festival weekend in the area. All the decent places were booked solid. As I heard later from a cousin, they ended up at a horribly overpriced, run-down chain hotel downtown that charged them extra for everything from parking to Wi-Fi. They paid hundreds of dollars a night, far more than they had ever budgeted. The bill went on Sharon's credit card, and Leo apparently grumbled about the cost for 2 straight days. Their glorious family trip devolved into a tense, miserable stay in a cramped, stuffy hotel room. No peaceful ranch, no relaxing escape, just a huge bill they couldn't avoid, and the sour taste of their own entitlement. I didn't know all the details yet as I sat by that pool, but I could imagine their seething frustration. And that photo from Bali wasn't just a picture of a vacation. It was a declaration of independence. It was a message. I was done. I had taken my power back, and it felt absolutely incredible. In Bali, I spent the rest of that day by the pool, letting the tropical sun warm my skin. I didn't check my phone. I didn't wonder about their angry messages. I didn't care. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I was completely and utterly free. Not just from their demands, but from the crushing weight of trying to earn their approval. I had no idea what would happen when I turned my phone back on, but I knew one thing for certain: they would never, ever see me the same way again. That moment wasn't just an escape, it was a turning point, and I was more than ready to embrace it. Bali was the paradise I never knew I so desperately needed. The resort was a symphony of life, the air a constant, fragrant blend of frangipani blossoms and sea salt. I hadn't come alone. The moment I booked my ticket, I had sent a message to my real family, my friends. Olivia, my closest friend since college, and our tight-knit crew, Ben, Laura, and Sam, had all jumped at the last-minute chance to join me. No questions asked. Their presence transformed the trip from a simple act of defiance into a profound act of reclamation. We spent our days exploring, weaving through the chaotic, colorful markets of Ubud, haggling playfully for silly trinkets, and laughing until our sides hurt over shared plates of nasi goreng from a street vendor. Olivia, as always, was the ringleader, her sharp wit and infectious energy pulling us from one adventure to the next. "You're glowing, Chloe," she told me one morning as we sipped strong Balinese coffee on the beach, her eyes studying me. "I haven't seen you look this light in years." I smiled, a real, genuine smile, because it was true. I felt like I had shed a heavy skin. Ben, the eternal jokester, roped us all into a Balinese cooking class, which we proceeded to turn into utter chaos, ending with more satay sauce on us than on the skewers. Laura, ever the practical one, kept our spontaneous adventures from spiraling completely out of control, while Sam, with his quiet humor and artistic eye, documented it all with his camera. For the first time, I wasn't catering to anyone else's needs or demands. I was just living. One evening, Olivia and I broke away from the group. The others had gone to a lively beach bar, but I needed a moment of quiet with her. We sat at the edge of the now empty infinity pool, dangling our feet in the cool water, a blanket of brilliant stars overhead. I took a deep, steadying breath. "I'm done, Liv," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I am completely done living for them." She just tilted her head, her expression patient, waiting for me to continue. I told her everything, not the old, tired stories of their mistreatment, but my new plan. My plan to finally, truly break free. I wanted to sell the ranch, or at least rent it out long-term and sever that tie for good. I wanted to build a life that was entirely my own. No more bending over backward for people who didn't even see me, let alone appreciate me. "You've been carrying that family on your back for far too long," she said, her tone gentle but unwavering. Her hand found mine in the dim light. "So, what's next for you?" I leaned back, looking up at the vast, dark sky. I talked about my dreams, the ones I had buried under years of obligation. Maybe starting my own boutique marketing firm, traveling more, for pleasure this time. Building something that was just for me. She listened to every word, nodding. "You are so much stronger than you give yourself credit for," she said finally. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of clarity, like a fog had lifted. I was finally stepping out of the supporting role they had written for me and into the lead of my own story. The rest of the trip was a joyful, liberating blur. We danced for hours at a beach party, the music a primal pulse in the warm night air. Ben dragged me into the ocean, and we laughed like kids as the waves knocked us over. Laura planned a sunrise visit to a temple, and her quiet awe was contagious as we walked through the ancient stone gates. I wasn't just escaping my family, I was actively rebuilding my life, surrounding myself with people who saw me, valued me, and celebrated me. Olivia's words echoed in my mind. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need to prove myself to them or to anyone. That simple realization was the greatest gift I could have ever given myself, a truth I would carry with me long after the scent of frangipani had faded. When I landed back in the States, feeling recharged and resolute, an email from Sharon was waiting for me. I sat in my quiet apartment, the warm glow of my Bali adventure still lingering, and I opened it. Her words were just as sharp and dripping with indignation as I had expected. "Your little stunt was completely unacceptable," she wrote. She accused me of deliberately sabotaging their weekend, of being petty and childish. She demanded a formal apology for leaving the ranch in a mess, the mess they had made, claiming I had embarrassed the entire family in front of Mark. An attached message from Leo was more of the same, calling me selfish and immature. The sheer audacity of it, their ability to so completely twist reality to fit their narrative, was breathtaking. But it wasn't surprising. They'd always made me the villain in their story. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. This time, their words didn't cut me. They didn't even sting. Bali had changed me. It had given me the distance and clarity to see their manipulation for what it was. I didn't owe them an explanation. I didn't owe them an apology. I didn't owe them anything. I didn't reply. Instead, I created a filter to send all emails from her address directly to the trash. Then I blocked her number. And Leo's. Severing those digital cords felt like a final, decisive act. My phone felt physically lighter in my hand. I wasn't going to engage. I wasn't going to argue. I was simply quietly done. The next morning, I called Diane, a sharp and pragmatic real estate agent I knew through a work connection. I laid out my plan for her. I wanted to rent out the ranch on a long-term lease. It was Eleanor's legacy, yes, but it had become a toxic chain, binding me to their chaos. I wanted to generate income, I told her, my voice clear and confident, not stress. She understood immediately. She suggested leasing it to a quiet family or perhaps a small business looking for a retreat space. We scheduled a meeting for the following week to walk through the property and get it listed. When I hung up the phone, a profound sense of control settled over me. The ranch would no longer be their playground. It would be an asset, mine to manage, on my terms. Later that week, my cousin discreetly filled me in on the full, glorious details of their disastrous trip. The rage from Sharon when they walked into the dirty house, the shouting match between her and Leo in the driveway, the humiliating scramble to find a room, and the disgust on their faces when they checked into the seedy hotel. Their weekend of bickering and recrimination sounded like a perfect reflection of their own carelessness. I didn't gloat. Their misfortune wasn't the point. The point was the lesson I had finally, painfully learned. For years, I had allowed their needs to completely eclipse my own. I had cleaned their messes, absorbed their insults, and starved for scraps of their respect. but no more. Talking with Olivia in Bali had solidified a truth that had been growing inside me for years. My worth was not something they had the power to measure. Cutting them off wasn't an act of revenge, it was an act of self-preservation. Renting out the ranch wasn't just a financial move, it was me, building a boundary of brick and mortar that they could no longer cross. That evening, for the first time in a long time, I started thinking about my own future. I pulled out a notebook and began sketching out ideas. A business plan for a small marketing agency, a list of countries I wanted to visit. The specifics didn't matter yet. What mattered was the feeling. For the first time, I was the one holding the pen. I was the one choosing the direction. I looked around my apartment and the space felt brighter, more open, full of potential. I wasn't the same woman who had left for Bali, burdened and broken by their disregard. I had learned to value myself more than their manipulation, and that was a victory they could never, ever take away from me.